Welcome all to this Prelude meeting. After a fairly lengthy hiatus this time, since our last Prelude, which was earlier this year, and actually an even longer time since our wonderful in-person conference in 2022 in Bern. So it's great to see you all here after this the brief hiatus here. This is actually definitely, this online meeting is now a genuine prelude, we could say, as we prepare for yet another major conference next year in Sydney in July 26th to 28th, 2024. So we have already received many wonderful papers for our call. The conference is shaping up wonderfully, and we look forward to more within the remaining 2 days, I believe, we have left for the deadline. So if you haven't submitted and you want to submit, please do. I encourage those of you, excuse me, still considering it to join us, as I think this will be really our best event yet. It's going to be amazing from everything that I hear is being planned. And we're actually going to hear more about this from Neil Perez da Costa and Peter Phillips, who are really the point people on the ground there helping to make this event happen. We can't really thank them enough for stepping up and offering their support and Sydney Conservatorium support to the Global Role meetings. With this, it's a very ambitious commitment that they've undertaken. No small feat to undertake such a conference, and we really should thank them all for this. So we'll hear more about that later on in the program. So in the meantime, we have a wonderful program for you today with some role history, some role analysis, and some actual role performances, with some real music. And we'll also undertake a slightly different format for some part of this, with some brief updates and reports from our friends who have been doing great work with roles. So we'll hear from Esther about a conference in Spain, and as well some other work in Switzerland, among other things. So I think with that, we'll begin with our first talk, which is Judith Kemp. Great to have you with us. She's a scholar in residence at the Deutsches Museum, and she has been researching role digitization for a possible project, I believe, at the museum. And it offers us today, if I may say so, sort of a different perspective on maybe role scanning and digitization, and in particular its history. So she has reached out and has been talking to many people involved with role digitization and scanning, and I think who offer different perspectives. So I'm myself very excited to hear more about this and from Judith. So welcome, Judith, and glad to have you with us.
Thank you very much, Kumaran. Yes, hello everybody. I'm very pleased to be here today and to be able to present my research project of the last 6 months. In 2015, the Deutsches Museum published a large-scale piano roll portal under the direction of Silke Berdux. And here you see the web page. The database includes more than 3,200 rolls of the Deutsches Museum. They can be searched under different aspects, such as interpreter, the type of music, or the type of role. And on this page, you can see an example of how each title is presented. So there are always 4 pictures of the role: the beginning of the role, the box, and the rolled up role, and the beginning of the piece. And next to the picture, you see all the relevant information about the role. And this way the information is listed here, and what information is given and so on has become the model for many other piano roll directories internationally. But now that we have this wonderful page, the question has arisen of how to make more information about the roles available in the database, and specifically a complete digitized copy of the roles that provides both an overall picture of the role and an audio file of the recording contained on the roll. And to answer this question, I started to research who has already dealt with this topic and what results they have come to so far. In the first step, I created a questionnaire, as many of you know, since Darlene Allenbach kindly sent this questionnaire to many of you. And I received many helpful answers to my questions this way. Of even greater importance, however, then proved to be the individual contact with the various people who have been involved in the digitization of piano rolls for many decades. And I spoke probably not to all, but to many of them. And without the many valuable hints which I received in this way, my research would have come to nothing. And I'm very, very pleased that many of them are here today at this online meeting. And I would like to mention some of the most important people with whom I have had very intensive exchange. Anthony Robinson, Wayne Stanky, Peter Phillips, Sebastian Bausch, and Julian Dyer should be mentioned at this point, as well as Richard Brandl, Tim Baxter, Spencer Chase, Daniel Debrunner, Urs van Krustem and Marcel Wiel, Rex Lawson, Craig Zapp, Michael Swanson, Mark Widuch, and Pietro Zappala, and others. And I would like to thank all of them very much for their great willingness to talk and for sharing their knowledge with me. So I've summarized the results of my research in an essay to be published as soon as possible. And I would now like to briefly outline the most important people and stages in the history of piano roll digitization. But before that, I would like to mention what results can be achieved today by digitizing piano rolls. So the contents stored on the rolls are preserved, and that obviously is the first and most important goal of digitization. An exact image of the roll is created, which reproduces information such as the arrangement of the holes, the color of the paper, inscriptions on and damage to the roll. The conversion of the obtained data into MIDI data or other audio formats enables the musical reproduction of the music stored on the roll independently of the instruments originally intended for it. Thus, the MIDI data can be transferred into any sampler sound and then stored in audio formats such as MP3 and played back via computers. Alternatively, the MIDI data can be used to control modern self-playing pianos. Using the digital data, copies of the roll can be repunched to sound on original instruments. The history of piano roll digitization splits into two strands that have developed largely independently of each other, namely the initiatives of private individuals and those of various institutions. So private piano roll experts made the start, as we can see here, beginning with the American mathematician and electrical engineer Wayne Stanky, who put his roll reader into operation in 1973. So that was exactly 50 years ago. On the institutional side, it took longer until people began to take an interest in the digitization of piano rolls. And here the Bern University of Applied Scientists, die Berner Fachhochschule, made a start in 1999 with the development of a scanner. And I will now go into these two strands in a little more detail, starting with the private initiatives. And you can see here three different types of devices that have been developed by private experts since 1973. Besides these, there have been other devices, but these three types mark the most important developmental steps, and so I will limit myself to them here. And I will go also into more detail about the types in a moment, but I first wanted to briefly show you an overall view. So on the left side, you see the electro-pneumatic roll readers, which made the beginning in the 1970s. The next step were the scanners with contact image sensor in the 2000s, and the latest state of the art are scanners with line scan camera. And I have listed below the picture how many devices there are to my knowledge, and you can see the number is very small. So today there's only one roll reader, since Wayne Stanky transformed his one into a scanner with a line scan camera later. Regarding the scanners with contact image sensor, I'm not entirely sure how many there are, because probably many people built them, but nobody knows of them, or only a few people know of them. So I guess there should be more or less 20, probably more. I don't know that yet. And to my knowledge, there are two existing scanners with line scan camera and privately owned. And the reason why there are so few devices is, of course, that they were never produced in series, but they were always self-creations of very specialized individuals. Now a few more words about these devices and what they could do and what they could not do. So the first devices were the electropneumatic roll readers made by Wayne Stanke and Peter Phillips, a well-known member of this circle. Both took their cue from the way self-playing pianos work and built devices that capture the information stored on the rolls electropneumatically. With the help of this method, the data could be stored on cassette and later on computer. However, this way, this was always audio data what was captured, while image data could not be produced. And this became possible with later devices, among which scanners with contact image sensor played an important role. And we can see one of them here. This is a scanner from Larry Doe of New York, likely the most sophisticated model of its kind built. And in these devices, with the help of a sensor like the one used in flatbed scanners, individual one-dimensional lines are permanently scanned one after the other, and a two-dimensional image in black and white or grayscale of the roll is created, which contains all the information, i.e. the punched holes, as well as graphic elements. This image data can then be converted into audio data, for example, MIDI data, and the music can be made audible. Problems that have arisen with these scanners is the very narrow depth of focus that results from the scanner module being extremely close to the roll during scanning. So this narrow depth of focus can cause the captured image to be inaccurate. And in addition, the scanner module has a maximum width of DIN A3, so that all rolls that are wider, such as the Welte red rolls, cannot be captured in their entirety. Several attempts were made to solve this problem of limited scan widths by mounting two scan modules to each other, but the results obtained with this way were not satisfactory, because sticking the pictures together never produces very good results, apparently. One method that has eliminated these problems is scanning with line scan camera. And we can see one of the two existing devices in privately owned here. This is, as I said before, there are two, and one is in the possession of Wayne Stanke, who also built the first roll reader, and the other one is at Anthony Robinson's in England, surely one of the most important people in the entire private piano roll digitization field at the moment. As with the CIS scanners, the image is scanned line by line and transferred to digital data. But the advantage of line scan cameras over CIS is that the camera is further away from the roll, and thus all roll widths, which can vary greatly, can be scanned, and the depth of focus is much wider. However, these privately owned scanners only produce image in grayscale. So much later than the aforementioned experts, various institutions started to deal with the digitization of piano rolls. And today there are three devices in institutional possession, which you can see here. On the left-hand side, you see the one of the Berner Fachhochschule, Bern University of Applied Sciences. They began developing their scanner in 1999, but it took a good 10 years before the device could be put in operation in its final form. Now, these days, they're working on a second version, which hopefully will start working soon. Bern was followed by the University of Pavia. Their first scanner was built in 2013. And they now work with a second version that started working in 2019. And on the right, you see the scanner of Stanford Library that also started working in 2019. And as you can see, all three scanners are equipped with line scan cameras, and all three can produce color images. Interestingly, the developers of Bern and Pavia proceeded completely independently of each other, and also had no contact with the previously mentioned private experts. Stanford, on the other hand, sought intensive exchange with the aforementioned individuals, including Wayne Stankey, Anthony Robinson, and Peter Phillips, and adopted their findings in part. So that's about the devices built so far. Now, of course, the question arises about the results achieved so far and the accessibility of these results. And here on this list, I have made an overview of some of the most important associations and institutions and their results. And at the top, you see the reference to the International Association of Mechanical Music Preservationists, on whose webpage private individuals exchange information. On this webpage, you can find a list of over 16,000 titles of digitized piano rolls. However, this is a sheer list, so that means that images of the rolls are not available. On the other hand, there are various emulated MIDI files, I don't know how many exactly, that can be downloaded, and I will talk about emulation in a moment. Then follow the three mentioned institutions with their own scanners. So with the Bernese scanner, over 7,000 rolls have been scanned to date. But on the webpage, this webpage that's mentioned here, Magic Piano, only one image file and 10 emulated MIDI files can be accessed on this homepage. The University of Pavia has digitized over 1,400 rolls, but offers no image on its homepage, whereas 900 rolls can be listened to online. The Stanford Library lists 456 digitized rolls on its homepage, for which image and audio data are available. I also wanted to mention the University of Barcelona, which also built its own scanner a few years ago and has digitized more than 5,000 rolls with it. For more than 3,600 of them, images and audio files are available on the site of the Spanish National Library. According to Jordi Roquer of the Musicological Institute of the University of Barcelona, the scanner is no longer in operation though. And efforts are being made at the moment to build a new scanner, and the image and audio data created so far are also to be revised. And last but not least, there is the University of Leipzig, which has digitized almost 2,400 rolls with an external device. There is image data for one of these rolls on the university's website, and there's also audio data for 291 rolls, but these are recordings of the Trifonola of the Leipzig Museum and not emulated MIDI files obtained from the scans. So as you can see, the number of digitized rolls is quite large and even much larger, of course, but I could, of course, not include all privately created scans that do not show up anywhere. But as you can also see, very few of the obtained results of digitization are accessible at all. And this is due to the fact that publishing the images on the internet is very problematic, since high-resolution image files require an incredible amount of server capacity, which most do not have. However, all institutions and private individuals make image files available for research purposes upon request. There is basically a consensus that the image files generated today, either with the CIS scanners or especially with the line scan cameras, are of very good quality and contain all the important parameters. With regards to the digitally generated audio files, on the other hand, opinions differ greatly. As we all know, there are two types of piano rolls, reproducing rolls and rolls for player pianos, and different challenges arise when transferring them to digital audio. So the reproducing pianos use the tracks down the sides of the roll to control the suction level and hence the velocities with which the hammers hit the string and thus the note dynamics. With the help of an emulator, this process is digitally imitated to produce comparable note velocities in the MIDI file. All the reproducing piano manufacturers use their own incompatible system, with each needing a different approach to emulation. And various people already mentioned here today have written emulation softwares, including Richard Brandl, Julian Dyer, Peter Phillips, Wayne Stankey, and also Kitty Shih of Stanford Library. However, opinions about the results obtained about the results obtained vary widely, and I could see that the possibilities, the necessities, and the weak points of emulation offer a lot of discussion. The situation is even more complicated with the digitized audio files of the player piano rolls. The problem with these is that only the perforations are transferred to an audio file during digitization, i.e. only the pitches and note length. When the digital audio file of such a roll is then played, it sounds incredibly mechanical and uniform. And what makes the player piano rolls, what makes up the player piano rolls, namely the interpretive intervention, is completely missing and is not possible afterwards. There have been various attempts to remedy this as well. For example, Rex Lawson, Spencer Chase, and Peter Phillips have built devices that make it possible to intervene in the musical events when the player piano rolls are played digitally. Most recently, Stanford University has developed a project called Pianolatron, which will create software that makes it possible to track interpretation via the computer keyboard as the roll is played. But there is still work to be done in the whole area of digital audio data obtained from the scans of the piano roll. This brings me to the end, and finally I would like to say that my essay, which I hope will be published very soon, is intended as an introduction for anyone who would like to tackle the subject of piano roll digitization themselves. And there is, as I could also see, absolutely a very growing interest worldwide. And for all those who don't even know what approaches there are so far and who have already dealt with it, this text is then intended as an aid. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Judith. Wonderful to hear about this, and very interesting from someone who's in the middle of it, so to speak, to consider and to think about the long history and as well the broader perspective on all of this. I think it'll be a wonderful resource for people to have an overview in an article like this. And it would be interesting to hear from anyone who has questions for Judith or comments or any further discussion. We have time for that for sure. Maybe I'll just start by suggesting if anyone wants to, they could just speak up for the moment, and I'll if we have too many people, we'll figure out that in a moment. But let's see here, or you could write in the chat if you'd like. Go ahead. Go ahead. So maybe I should ask, I could start. Judith, did you explain yet what is the status of the rolls at Deutsches Museum, and what maybe would be the goals for future work there with those rolls beyond what was already described in the talk?
No, we don't know that yet, because as I said, we would like to digitize them. But so before we wanted to do that, we wanted to find out what digitization of piano roll really means. So that was really the starting point for my project. And so I think what I've done now is really supposed to be, hopefully it will help us, but it probably will also help other people who want to, get an first overview and an orientation. And from what I found out yet, so far we're not entirely sure yet how to proceed. So that's all I can say really at the moment. Because as I also said, especially regarding the audio files, it seems to be a bit tricky. Yeah, getting very good audio results. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I have, I have obviously, as again, being in the middle of it, so to speak, we're doing the same project. You've talked about it. I would say that, as you described, I think the visual files, especially the images of the rolls, are indeed a complicated server matter. You could say it's difficult to hold such large images in any sort of public area. But I would say that there are solutions afoot, and particular, what we are choosing to use may or may not work for some institutions, which is this format that IIIF format that actually a number of archival institutions have chosen for the sake of visual materials like maps and this sort of thing. But it is to some extent stretched thin with roll images, because rolls actually have, on the other hand, they have the audio component. And this is, to me, one of the very unfortunate, you could say, perspectives from the archiving and museum perspective, which is that it is both an important visual document and an important audio document. And we have this, and many of the archival viewing formats, you could say, don't have great capability in both. You know, it's a tricky interface to have with both. So yeah, anyway, that's yeah, go ahead.
But it would also help, because I thought that a bit difficult, that for example, all institutions say they would give their you know, high resolution images for request for research, but I don't know what the institutions have, right? So for example, when I just choose now the Bernese scanner, and I know that there have been 7,000 scans have been made with this scanner, but I don't know which ones. So that it would be very helpful if there were at least some lists on which one could see what has been scanned so far. And also, I mean, also regarding all the private individuals, because as I said before, of course, I have no idea how, or I have some idea, of course, because I've heard of many people and heard that they have scanned thousands of rolls, but there are no existing lists that give an overview of what has been scanned so far, and that would help, so that even if I cannot access the roll or the picture immediately, that I could have at least an overview, and then know whom to ask for what picture. But that's, yeah, I don't know. I think that I also read in my whole research that Mark Wiedoch is planning a very, very big website on which in some future days he will put all information that he has been gathered. And I think he dreams of this big, but he can say more about that, of course. But he, as I read in this text, he dreams of this huge portal that really consists of everything that there has been done in this field so far. But I think this is a very, very big project and will take a long time, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, go ahead.
I'd just like to say, as Judith was pointing out about private collections, I've got over 8,000 reproducing penna rolls, most of which are documented on my website and are available for free to researchers and for sale to those who just want the music for the pleasure. I just sort of think that private individuals like myself have done a lot of work in this field. And because we're not associated with an institution, we're sort of a bit lost out there. But I just point out that my website is very accessible to everybody. And certainly I help a lot of researchers and have done over many years. And the important thing in my website is that they're all reproducing penna rolls. I'm working with Mark, I'm working with Stanford, I'm working with a lot of people. And the question I often think is, what happens when I pass on? I have this massive collection, all documented, fully database, the whole bit, and I feel that it's a very important collection, and I know others agree with me. Where do we go from there? So that's another question. Private individuals like myself have a lot to offer, and institutions need to take over these collections at some point. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Are there any other comments? Please just speak up. I think that'll be easiest, and we have it. Or questions.
Thank you, Judith. I'm just wondering the reason for attempting to digitize ordinary machine-cut 88-note music rolls, or whatever, 65-note music rolls. We have all the data that they were created from in the printed score, which is how they were made in the first place. I know that there are differences slightly in depending on who was actually making the transcription in the factory. And I know from some that I have, which are musically quite excellent, and some which are rather everyday, and to my mind, not very good at all. So why do you need to digitize 88 note rolls?
Well, I'm sure there are people who are really more expert than me in this field, but I mean, I'm sure there's a consensus that, as you also said, the rolls are not just copies of the scores, right? But they are the interpretations of the people who punched the rolls, the arrangers, and I had a very long conversation about this with Julian Dyer, who it's very sound is very strange now. Can you hear me normally?
Yes.
Okay. So Julian Dyer said that that these arrangers of the rolls they had a lot of influence on the musical result. So it's not just a copy from the notes, and all the rolls can also differ, right? You can have 3 rolls or 5 rolls of the same piece, and they can sound complete even of the same time apparently, but each copy can sound differently. So yeah, I think and the main problem is that this paper can get damaged in time, and can the paper, I mean, paper in general is especially when the rolls are wrapped and then they get stiff and they can break, so the code can get lost. That is the code that is stored on the roll can get lost, and that's the main reason why to digitize them. But I'm sure there are many experts here who can also answer this question or make a comment on this.
If anyone would like to comment, please go ahead.
Can I chip in? And I'm not a musicologist or anything else, but I am a bit of a collector and so on. I suspect, and I stand to be well and truly corrected on this, that the interest doesn't lie quite so much in rolls which are straight transcriptions of well-known scores, so Beethoven, Chopin, all that sort of thing. I suspect the interest lies in rolls which have been arranged, are perhaps of more obscure pieces that perhaps have never been published as in that arrangement as scores and so on. That's where I suspect it lies. So I suspect Michael's absolutely spot on in terms of drawing board transcriptions of scores. Although I think there's sometimes some interesting deviations from the scores, but more particularly, I suspect it's ethnic piano rolls, it's popular rolls or jazz rolls that represent something that you can't get in a score, and so on. That's just my 2 pennyworth. I'm not a musicologist, I'm an engineer. I'm not a musician like Michael. That's my take on it, but I'm just answering because nobody else has come up with that answer or anything like it. So that's my perception. Others feel free to disagree.
Thank you very much for that comment. I'm happy to hear from other voices, and that I'm happy to take other comments as well. Actually, I would just say at this point, I think we probably will move on. But just as a brief response to this from my perspective as well, I do believe there's great value to 88 note rolls for a variety of reasons, including all of those just mentioned. And we will also have a little bit of a further consideration of that at the end as well of this meeting with regards to our consideration of Bob Berkman and his life working with 88 note rolls largely. So we'll bring this topic up again, and it might spur further discussion and commentary on it. But I do believe we need to spend more time discussing both 88 note rolls the way they should be considered, and also hope to draw those of you who might be working with popular rolls, we call them, or 88 note rolls, into the foreground of our meetings, because we have certainly had a strong preference or bias, you might say, a bit towards reproducing rolls for a variety of reasons. So if anyone would like to contribute papers on this topic or to make a case for these very valuable parts of our legacy, please do contact us, submit a paper to the conference, or join us for the Prelude meetings and so forth.
I
So
would like
I think we'll
to
maybe move on at this point. Yeah,
I would like to
sure.
add
Go ahead. One more
one
comment.
information. It's Silke from Deutsches Museum. Hello, everybody. And I think that these 88 roles are part of our cultural heritage, as every role is. And so it's important, as you said some minutes ago, it's important to deal with them and to think about them. And that's a part of the project.
Absolutely. I also very much agree with that. Even the arrangements of scores have interest to me. Those are perhaps the lowest on that totem pole, but yeah, we often know that actually what was passed off as arrangements are not actually arrangements. Sometimes they were played as well. And I find that there are performance elements even in those so-called arranged roles. There's a lot of mystery and a lot of things that need to be still studied and researched on all those roles. And they are indeed a part of the legacy. And at Stanford, I know we have more than half of our 25,000 roles are 88 note roles too. So we definitely believe in that, although we haven't started we haven't put them online. Just to that point, Pianolatron, another little shameless plug here, is actually intended to be a digital tool for playing 88 note roles. So in other words, we'll be able to treat it a little bit like a pianola, and that's one of the purposes of that particular application. So we'll get into that at some other point. In any case, I think we'll move on. Thank you so much, Judith, for this really wonderful talk, stimulating discussion. It feels like there's so much more that should come out of this, and hopefully there will be more collaboration between all of those individuals that you've mentioned. And I think that's exactly what this forum is meant to do. So I'm excited still to take the message from that talk, perhaps to our next meeting, and to continue this work to try and get some of these things that you have addressed very correctly and that need to be addressed, and to work at that together with others of you here. So thank you so much, Judith, for joining us for this talk, and we hope to see you again. So I think we'll move on now to Peter Phillips, who hardly needs an introduction. We've already heard from Peter here, and he actually has filled in a bit for one of the guests who was unable to make it on one of the talks relating to Pachmann. And that is actually, I think, where he'll begin, if I'm correct, to discuss a sort of new discovery, a new role, which is one of the beautiful things of this community, and the collaboration actually that happened between so many different parts. In fact, it feels like from our last conference, I may be mistaken on this, but the awareness has been raised between members who attended, and we were able to track down a new role. And so that is, and then he's gone through the process of digitizing it, and then we're discussing it relative to an older copy of that same role and so forth, I believe. Wonderful work. And that's role analysis and performance practice to some extent about Vladimir de Pachmann. And then he will also continue with his actually planned talk, which was to discuss some new findings from his role research on Welte Mignon expression and the process of editing, I believe, that's related to Welte Mignon. So Peter, once again, welcome, and glad to have you for these talks, and thank you for filling in as well on that other talk. So we're going to hear more from you. Thanks to Peter. Take it up. Take it up. Thanks.
You have to unmute, Peter. We don't hear you.
Mute. Now, share. Are we on? Yes. Is that all working for you?
Yeah. Maybe you should.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I'm now proceeding. Okay, this presentation is about Henselt's La Gondola Etude and the two Welte roll recordings of this work made by Vladimir de Pachmann. Hang on, what's going on? Oh, right. There we are. That should be good. Oh, good. Okay. Adolf von Henselt's La Gondola Etude is the second piece in his Opus 13 titled 10 Pieces for Piano, first published in 1841 when Henselt was aged 27. Apart from the two versions by Pachmann, it was recorded by Leopold Gottschewski for the duo art and by Earl Douglas LaRosse for the Ampico. And these are the only recordings of the work on reproducing piano roll.
Just what I always wanted.
British pianist Daniel Grimwood has recorded 2 CDs of works by Henselt, and he discusses the composer and La Gondola on a YouTube video. According to Grimwood, Henselt is one of the most important pianist composers of the 19th century. He points out that one of the reasons Henselt's works are not heard today is because of their extreme difficulty, while yielding unrewarding results, unlike works by Liszt or Chopin. I recommend watching Grimwood's YouTube video to hear his views on the importance of Henselt and this particular work. I'll put the link in the Zoom comments area, I think. Henselt's La Gondola is included in a book of 20 etudes titled Method of Method, or Methodes de Méthodes, compiled by Ignace Michelis and Francois-Joseph Fétis. It was published around 1840. The compilers asked composers such as Chopin, Liszt, Mendelssohn, Thalberg, Henselt, and others to write an etude for the book that highlighted what they considered to be important aspects of piano technique. Henselt's contribution is titled Les Adieux de Patre, or Farewell to Father. And as Grimwood explains, the work strives for balance of touch and beauty of tone. It was later renamed and published as La Gondola Etude. Vladimir de Pachmann recorded his version of the work for the Welte Mignon in Leipzig on the 19th of February 1906. However, the roll was not issued until June 1926. It was titled in Welte Mignon catalogues as Improvisation in the Form of a Gondola Song, listing Pachmann as the composer, with no reference to Henselt. It was issued on roll number 1227. Pachmann recorded his second version of the work for the Welte licensee at the Deluxe Recording Studio in New York in 1924 when he was touring America. This roll, number C7208, was issued in November 1925. It is listed by Larry Sitsky as Etude Opus 13, number 2, La Gondola, composed by Henselt. The rollography compiled by Richard Howe and Charles David Smith lists the work as Thema from La Gondola, as you can see on the last dot point on this slide. Questions therefore arise about the titling of the work, as in both rolls it is clear that the work is by Henselt, with additional notes and alterations by Pachmann. Neither version can be described as an improvisation. Instead, as an anonymous musicologist explains, the compositional resources Pachmann used to embellish the work are extremely simple, but well suited to his expressive purpose. In my piano roll database, I have titled the 2 recordings as La Gondola by Henselt Pachmann, played by Pachmann, with the recording date added to the title to differentiate between the 2. We come now to listening to the 2 recordings by Pachmann, which were made of my C5 Disklavier, playing my emulations of the roll MIDI files. To begin with, I'm playing Gottschewski's 1916 duo art recording of La Gondola, as written by Henselt, synced with Gottschewski's 1916 edited version of Henselt's score. Following this recording, we'll hear Pachmann's version of the work recorded in 1906 for Welte, also synced to the same score. Obviously, there are going to be differences between them. Immediately following, we'll hear Pachmann's second version of the work, recorded in 1924. Each recording takes around 2 minutes. Gottschewski. Pachmann. Now, as you can hear, the two versions of Parkman are obviously different, especially towards the end of the work, and both of them have two extra bars at the start of the work. We don't have time to make detailed comparisons. Instead, I'm showing this screenshot of the last few bars of the MIDI files, where most of the differences occur. It's a case of the more you look, the greater the number of subtle differences. The highlighted areas are the most obvious, but his left-hand accompaniment also differs considerably between the two versions. This slide shows the added trill in the 1924 recording. The second last arpeggiated chord in both of Pachmann's versions is a D-flat seventh, shown outlined in blue. Henselt's score has a C-flat minor chord, also outlined in blue in bar 51 of the score. The top B-flat, outlined in yellow at the top right of your screen, shows that the note is repeated 5 times, which you would have heard. But this is a roll perforating error. A recording made in 1950 of this roll for the Columbia Masterworks series has only one repeating note, as in the 1924 roll recording. I left that error in for a very good reason, which you'll hear later. The 1906 roll was the only Pachmann E-roll that I did not have in my collection. It is possibly a rare roll, given it was not issued until 1926, 20 years after Pachmann recorded it. I'm indebted to Joyce Tang at the Brentford Musical Museum and also to Steve Barrett White, who arranged shipment of a green version of this roll to be sent to Munich, so Mark Vidic could digitize it and send me the relevant files to produce the MIDI file you just heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you so much. I would ask if anyone has any questions about this or any comments.
Just one thing, if I may, that just came into my mind. You were showing that Welte for this role, so not deluxe, but really Welte, the European company, gave this title improvisation on a Gondola song and didn't mention at all the composer Henselt. That reminds me that just the role before that, so the 1226, which is Pachmann's version of this infamous Maiden's Prayer, has exactly the same title. And I don't even, unfortunately, don't even remember who told me this story, but I remember that once I was told that in that case, it was because of copyright issues, that the publishers of this piece, who were earning tons of money from selling the sheet music, prevented it to be recorded. And that I'm not, I never checked this story, but that Welte even had to fight legal battles over this so that they could publish a recording of it, because they were claiming that it was actually just an improvisation on this theme and not a performance or a recording of the actual composition. So maybe something similar. I mean, although I think that no one had any copyright claims on this Henselt piece at that time, but maybe that was a similar reason why they chose to give it this title and didn't mention the author.
The other role at that time was the Savarov polka, which was a piece that, I think, a tune that Pachmann borrowed. But the interesting thing about the Savarov polka was it wasn't issued till 1930. And it was believed that the role was never intended to be sold. So there's those 3 interesting roles listed, I think, as improvisations. Yeah. Well, if there's no other questions, will I continue, Kumaran?
Absolutely, Peter. Go ahead.
Good.
And it's sort of a related topic, so I look forward to it. Yep.
Right. All right. I need to just set myself up here. Sharing screen. Very confusing. So early in the morning. for this poor boy. Share screen. Share, and I bring this up. Oh, wait a sec. Goodness me, don't know where I am. Right. Okay, are we set? Yes. Good. Okay, I'll just go to my... Right, we're set. Sorry about the delay. I've been working on creating emulated MIDI files of Welte rolls for over 10 years. But the journey of discovery continues, as I will explain in this presentation. Over the last 2 years, I've been working with MIDI files of Welte Mignon rolls from scans produced by Mark Vidic. To begin with, to make the file suitable for emulation, I extend all notes by 20 milliseconds to account for travel time over a tracker bar hole, and add acceleration to the file to account for paper acceleration. Since starting this work, I have discovered a range of issues that have meant revising over 500 of these MIDI files, which has taken me since the beginning of this year. So this presentation is about my findings and the type of editing to the MIDI files I'm now undertaking. Some time ago, I gave a talk about MIDI files of Duker rolls, in which I explained that the theme perforations on either side of the roll typically overlap the notes to be accented, as shown in this slide. My theory was that in a pneumatic piano, the increasing suction caused by these theme perforations would act while the pneumatic was closing. Otherwise, why would editors place these perforations so they overlapped the playing notes? To prove this, I set up a pneumatic playing a key on a piano so I could measure how long it took for the pneumatic to close under different levels of suction. The measurements I took ranged from over 150 milliseconds to less than 50 milliseconds. Now, these are only indicative times, but they show that a changing suction during a pneumatic's closing time affects the speed at which it closes, and therefore the force it applies to the piano key. A MIDI piano, whether virtual or mechanical, plays a note at the MIDI velocity level attached to the note data. In a MIDI mechanical piano like the Disklavier, the speed of the solenoid plunger pushing a key cannot be changed after it starts moving. So this is a fundamental difference between a pneumatic piano and a MIDI piano. The emulator converts the expression data on a roll to MIDI velocity values. The velocity value attached to a note is determined by the calculated level of suction occurring when the note starts playing. This slide shows a photo of a Welte Mignon roll in which the expression lines show how the suction level varies while the roll is playing. When creating MIDI files of Duker rolls for emulating purposes, I had to move the theme notes so their full effect occurred before the start of the note being accented. Otherwise, the emulator algorithm would only apply that part of the theme note occurring before the start of the note being accented. A similar thing happens in Welte MIDI files. A Welte reproducing piano has a bass side and a treble side expression regulator like that shown here. The position of the expression pneumatic determines the suction level applied to the player action and therefore the playing volume. This pneumatic operates by crescendo action, in which it is either moving quickly or slowly in either direction, or it is stationary. To move it quickly requires either of two expression notes in the roll, which I call the fast crescendo and fast decrescendo notes. The length of these notes determine how long the fast crescendo action occurs. This slide shows a section of a Welte Mignon roll with the fast crescendo notes outlined in red and the fast decrescendo notes circled in blue. The fast crescendo action has three main functions. The first is to give a playing volume higher than the slow crescendo action is capable of. It is used also to create a relatively fast crescendo over a musical phrase, which is created beauty by a series of fast crescendo and fast decrescendo expression notes that collectively give the desired crescendo effect. An important function is to accent individual playing notes. In this case, as shown in this slide, a fast crescendo note is positioned to increase the suction level before affected notes start playing. The suction level is returned to its previous level with a fast decrescendo note. The shortest time available on a Welte roll for a fast crescendo action is a single punch perforation, which has a playing time of around 68 milliseconds. As in Duke roll, the fast crescendo expressions in Welte rolls often overlap a note being accented. In a Welte Mignon, we hear their full effect. This slide is a Welte roll 2920, in which there are two playing notes on either side of the stack being accented. The top note is on the treble side of the stack and is accented by a treble fast crescendo note which occurs before the note plays. The lower note on the bass side of the stack is accented by a bass fast crescendo note that overlaps the playing note. Both notes will play at the same volume on a Welte instrument, but in an emulated MIDI file, the lower note will not be accented at all. This slide shows the same issue in which the fast crescendo notes are overlapping the notes to be accented. A reason editors did this was to ensure that the targeted note was the only one being accented. In both cases in this slide, we know accenting is the purpose because a fast crescendo decrescendo note, shown in blue, follows the fast crescendo note. In this slide, the treble fast crescendo note overlaps the accented note while the bass side fast crescendo note does not. In the previous slides, only bass crescendo notes overlapped accented notes. That is, there is no pattern in how crescendo notes were placed. This slide shows a series of single punch fast crescendo notes with a duration of the 68 milliseconds. Notice that up to half the length of these notes overlaps the playing notes. In an emulated MIDI file, note accenting on a Disklavier would be half that compared to playing the roll on a Welte Mignon. As mentioned, Welte rolls often have single punch fast crescendo and fast decrescendo notes that should play for this 68 milliseconds. MIDI files derived from scans can result in notes with a duration of less than 68 milliseconds, requiring their length to be adjusted. A roll reader also has this error, but to a lesser extent. Fast crescendo action notes vary in length depending on the required dynamic and can last for over half a second. I have found numerous cases in which single punch fast crescendo and decrescendo notes are used throughout a roll, even on very long rolls. Their playing time and therefore their effect decreases over the length of the roll due to paper acceleration. An example is Chopin's Funeral March, which has an ABA structure. The expression coding is the same in both A sections, but the effect on the dynamics is reduced in the second A section compared to the first, as it occurs 7 to 8 minutes later. By this time, these short crescendo notes are playing for 54 milliseconds, or even less in longer rolls. So two changes I am making to Welte MIDI files are shown in this slide. The most significant change is aligning the fast crescendo notes so their full effect is heard on a MIDI instrument. The second is to correct what I believe are errors due to some Welte editors not considering the effect of paper acceleration. There is no musical reason that the accenting effect should reduce over the length of a roll. My fix is to adjust the minimum duration of all fast crescendo and fast decrescendo notes in an accelerated MIDI file to 68 milliseconds. This also corrects roll scanner and roll reader errors. These changes to e-roll MIDI files of Welte rolls might sound dramatic. Instead, the results are more subtle and apply mainly to the soft playing. The files now potentially sound like the roll playing on a well-adjusted Welte Mignon. By correcting the minimum lengths of short duration fast crescendo and decrescendo notes to 68 milliseconds, the intent of the editors is now audible on a MIDI piano. This list shows other errors that I attend to. A common perforating problem is the missing punch, causing a note to repeat. We saw this in my previous presentation in the 1227 roll of Pachmann. I have noted in a few cases that expression coding to accent a note is on the wrong side of the roll. Other errors are listed in this slide, which I'll explain further on. This slide shows one of the more unusual perforator errors. The circled group of notes are all incorrect and occur in a cyclic way throughout most of the roll. I assume an error occurred in the perforator and is surprising the roll was issued. It required careful editing to fix. This slide shows the file with the incorrect notes deleted, although surprisingly, playing the emulated version of both files gave similar results. The greatest change was in the loud pedal, which was pulsing madly in the original file. As well, the initial loud pedal on note was missing in the scan, requiring examining the score to determine the correct pedaling. An instance of strange expression coding in the roll is shown in this slide, in which the fast decrescendo action occurs in random ways. In the example circled in blue up the top, the fast decrescendo note begins before the accented note starts playing. The effect is the note plays more softly, where the intent is to make it play more loudly. In other cases, the fast decrescendo action occurs while the pneumatic is closing or while the fast crescendo action is occurring, resulting in limited or no accenting. The position of fast decrescendo notes being too close to a fast crescendo note is often an issue. I have found when referring to later issues of a roll, such as licensee or green versions, the fast decrescendo notes are moved further away from the fast crescendo notes. In the beginning, it seems Welte editors did not consider pneumatic closing time and the effect of close spacing between fast crescendo and fast decrescendo notes. In a MIDI piano, once the note data is sent to the piano, any change in the expression afterwards has no effect on that note, perhaps an advantage of the MIDI instrument. There are two reasons for short spacing between repeating notes. The main reason is editors forgetting that notes play for longer than they appear on the roll, due to the extra time caused by perforations passing over a tracker bar hole. Another is the punch size in a perforator, which is the reason for the short gaps between the circled notes in this slide. This roll was cut in 1917, showing that Welte, even then, used old-style perforating equipment. So part of my editing process is to ensure adequate gaps between playing notes. This slide shows that during the time a soft pedal is on, it might be cycled on and off briefly without having any musical effect. On a Disklavier, this causes unwanted noise. This may have been done to reset the suction level in the regulators. Not many rolls have this, fortunately. In a few cases, I dispute the loud pedal timing, in which the pedal is turned off too soon. This effect may be exaggerated in a Disklavier or a virtual piano. When it is clearly not musical, I move the pedal off note. But I've also heard problems with pedaling on recordings of a Welte Mignon, such as in the Tacit series of recordings. Welte rolls have more production issues than any other brand of roll, especially those recorded in 1905-06. These problems are generally addressed in later issues as well as in licensee and green rolls. For me, it means staring at and editing MIDI files for hours every day. The reward is hearing the final results of my Disklavier, in which note accenting is clearer and more expressive throughout the work. Rapidly repeating notes all sound, and overall the playing sounds more natural. I like to believe I'm hearing a more accurate version of the original playing that I would on an original instrument. Thank you for listening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Peter. Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from others?
Let me get back to where I should be.
Please just speak up, talk, and I have so much to talk about, but I will hold my my comments for the moment. That's wonderful. Anyone else have anything to say?
I would have one question, if I may. Thank you so much, Peter. I think those things are extremely important to know about and to include in the emulation process. Just one thing, maybe a bit of a sophist question. If some of the things that you mentioned come from just response times of pneumatics and so on, if we think that the emulator software should emulate whatever the pneumatic on an original system does when it's in perfect shape and perfect condition, wouldn't it then be better to include these things into the emulation software instead of editing the MIDI file before emulating it?
Look, it'd be wonderful if we could do this. I've thought considerably about how one would do this. The trouble is I find no regularity in the way these WAP files are produced. In other words, an algorithm that predicts what's going to happen and corrects it before it goes to a MIDI file, it's very difficult. I just can't see how you would do this. It's amazing the variations that happen between the rolls. Some rolls are perfect. Some rolls you don't need to do any work on. Some rolls don't even have fast crescendo notes and fast decrescendo, so they need no editing at all. Others do, and some of them have, I would guess, over 1,000 of these little perforations. So if there was some way in which this could be automated or predicted, it would save me hours of work. But in the meantime, I see no other alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not speaking. I fully agree with you that if you see things on the roll that are obviously not were obviously not the intention of the performer, and so maybe not the intent, even not the intention of the editor, but just production errors, that you have to correct them manually. But it's just about those things that would turn out differently if you play the roll on a real pneumatic instrument, on a real Welte Mignon. Then for me it seems to be more an issue of the emulating software.
I'm not sure what you mean there, Sebastian. Bearing in mind that what I'm attempting to do is make the Disklavier sound like a Welte Mignon. I'm not trying to change the roll at all. I simply want it to sound like a good Welte Mignon. The other corrections, such as note spacing and all these sort of errors of length of the fast crescendo notes, it's simply correcting an error. And I can assure you many Welte rolls have very poor spacing between repeating notes. It's surprising, the errors there.
Yeah, but those things would also sound unconvincing if you play the original roll on a real Welte.
Correct.
There you really need to interfere with what is on the roll because because of musical taste or just common sense or so. Yeah.
Well, it's just common sense. If you see two notes spaced, they should repeat.
Yes.
And if they don't, you've got a problem. It's not in all rolls, but it is in quite a few, particularly in busy works, sonatas, where there's a lot of repeating notes. And the result, in fact, I was alerted to this actually when we played a roll by Raul Pugno of a Scarlatti sonata. Neil and a student were here hearing these rolls, and we heard that the notes playing on the Disklavier, which is very good at repeating notes, were blurred. When we played it through a virtual piano, it sounded fine. Then I looked at the green version of that roll, all good. Then I looked at my notes and realised that the roll I had recorded from the Condon collection had very large perforator-sized punches, meaning it could never play properly on a Welte Mignon. It was an original roll. So this is my point. The errors in Welte rolls are far greater than any other roll brand I have seen. And they're punching errors, they're editing errors, and they're obvious when you stare at these things. And they, once fixed, it's fine, and it just requires that repair.
Yeah, I think it's just that it's very important to of course document all these changes and to look at them case by case, because of course one of the big advantages of the Welte system, especially with the earlier recordings, is that with all likelihood, with all that we know of it, we can assume that there was relatively little editorial interference with these recordings in comparison, let's say, with later Ampico rolls or so. And of course, that also, I think that's perfectly reasonable, that this also increases the amount of problems that occur with these rolls. If we assume that there was a more or less automatic way of producing these rolls, and that they didn't interfere that much with it, and yeah, then more of these problems remain in the rolls. And the moment someone changes things and someone actively interferes and improves things, we then always have to check, is this just to stay to bring out what was originally there, to make the role technically better, or is it something that interferes with the original intention of the artist? And I think Hermann Gottschewski now did some very, very promising first research, and I'm sure he will speak about that next year in Sydney, comparing all of these changes, especially in the dynamic perforation. And he showed me examples where indeed maybe something that is on a green roll or on a later red issue from the 1920s might work better, but changes the dynamic outline of the performance so much that you cannot claim any kind of authenticity anymore. So there we run into troubles then.
Yeah, I think one of the problems Welte editors had in the beginning was the number of rolls they were working with. They were trying to get a lot of rolls on the market, and my impression of some of these rolls, and it's usually in the early rolls and the early cuts, is that the errors were made as a result of trying to do too much too quickly. The errors that I'm finding are primarily when you hear the roll fixed and to what a prior, there's not a huge difference. It's not as though suddenly it's come alive. It's just that you know now that a note that should have been accented is now being accented. It's detail. I don't point out that this is a major change. I think it's simply making things sound how they intended, not what I think or not what somebody else might think. And as you say, later rolls are all edited to correct some of these errors. And some of the errors are obvious. It's not as though it's a musical decision. It's simply the punch being put in the wrong spot. And these guys had to work on a piece of paper. I'm working on a large computer screen. I'm seeing things magnified. They had to work with tiny little punches, staring at a paper roll. And I know after hours of work myself how tiring it is. And I'm sure editors back then felt the same. And trying to punch all this data in and doing it accurately, and also only observing the roll, where I'm observing the pneumatic signal that goes to the piano. In other words, I'm seeing the final result. And I can see the errors that they couldn't see. So the changes that I'm making are very subtle and I think don't interfere at all with the roll. But having said that, this is only applying to emulated files. I always keep the original and it's never touched. So we always have the beginning and the end. And if researchers would prefer to look at the original file, that's excellent. I prefer to hear a file which on my Disklavier produces what I believe are the editor's intent and what was actually recorded, rather than the errors that have crept in as a result of the intensive amount of work these guys had to go to, and which were later corrected in green and licensee roles in later issues. Now, you might say that they were corrected more than I'm doing. They might have been. My changes are very subtle and very carefully thought out. I only move those perforations where it's obvious what has to happen to make it sound correct on a Disklavier. In other words, I'm not making wholesale changes. I'm not suddenly taking the whole thing and saying, whoopee, let's make this into a modern, wonderful performance. Not at all. Very subtle. But
Very
enough.
good, very good. Sorry, Peter. I'm just going to jump in here for a moment and just say if there are any other questions. This is a wonderful discussion and so many important things here. We do have to keep track of our time. We're doing okay, but we need to keep moving in a moment. There was another question on the chat from Roland, which was along the same lines as the conversation just here veered, which is this issue of maybe researchers, the archival research and documenting these changes. So as you say, knowing that these the original files, the original role is somehow documented as the original role and separate from the emulated or edited file is very important. I would just add that personally, even here at Stanford, we've considered this topic, and it's an interesting problem for me to consider annotations and how we note and record edits to roles. And that's an interesting issue which has been raised, which we've thought about in a number of different ways. But if we had some way in which to make notations of what has been done and why it's there, that would be a very useful resource, I think, for future people who are looking at roles and trying to figure out, as you have already, Peter, all of the intricacies and complexities of the editing process, the punching errors and so forth. So just really wonderful, such valuable work that needs to be done. We have noticed so many of sort of quirks and curiosities in the role editing, including that, by the way, soft pedal on-off cycling thing, which is often very mysterious to me. I don't quite understand it also, and so it was great to see your explanation for it. In any case, are there any other questions? Someone else just jump in for one moment and then we may go on otherwise. Okay, I think we will then proceed. This topic requires further follow-up, and we will, I'm sure, in the coming conferences, Prelude and Real in person. Peter will be there, and I'm sure there's more work yet to come. Thank you so much, Peter, for these topics and for filling in as well on the first paper. And as usual, a wonderful presentation with beautiful preparation and diagrams and showing all of your detailed work. So thank you so much for that fantastic talk. So we will now just finish off the conference, so to speak, with brief updates and some reports from people, a little more informal and a little more casual, and perhaps a little window into some of the ongoings in the role community. So we'll start off at this point with Esther, reporting on a conference that has taken place in Spain, a role conference. And I believe she'll also have a video to share with us about that. Hopefully she has been made a host by Daniel, if that's the case. And I will, Esther also doesn't need much introduction, being a regular participant and member of the community and having been at our conferences now for many years. She was also wonderfully helpful to us at Stanford with some of our roles and did a fantastic work with a collection that has been documented, Garcia San Pedro collection, and had a wonderful residency in Palo Alto. So good to see you, Esther, again, and why don't you take it from here?
Okay, thank you very much. I hope everybody can listen to me. Thank you very much for being here today and giving me the opportunity of showing you some of the work we did last year, October 2022, just a few months after our global piano roll meeting in Bern. Having this wonderful event in mind, I decided to prepare something similar to what we had lived in Bern, and move it to Madrid and my faculty. We prepared a one-day seminar with the participation of music librarians, most of them heritage representative libraries, researchers, and other people, like our students of our faculty, all of them interested in piano rolls. All were Spanish people coming from the whole country, different parts of our country, Barcelona, Granada, San Sebastian, Pamplona, Zaragoza, and even Vienna, through a video conference connection. People that you all know, like Jordi Roquer, Lourdes Rebollo, Carolina Estrada, myself, and also Laura Granero in remote state. All of them colleagues that also participated in Bern, and most of you already know. We had a wonderful time and ended with a ghost piano concerto, as we had a Yamaha Disklavier in the hall, and two of the participants in the meeting arranged for the piano to play the music of Scriabin. It was simply fantastic. And the people that attended the meeting were really enthusiastic. In addition to the meeting and all the papers presented, all of them very interesting, we opened an exhibition of rolls from the Hassan collection that we had been working on it for the last year, as you all know, and I presented in Bern. Although I have to make a warning, although it's a homemade video and the format is a little bit, how can I say, it's not a wide screen because I did it with my iPhone. I think it's interesting, and of course, attending to what all the colleagues said, I have dubbed it into English so that I can share it today with all of you. I hope you like the result. It can give you an idea of what did we show there. At the end of this video, I will make a brief comment of the publication of the catalog that we made of this same exhibition. So I'll try to do it the best I can, see if it works, and I'm going to share a short video of the exhibition.
Hello, good evening. Let's start this tour with the Hassan Hoche-Schroeder's piano roll exhibition. This exhibition takes place in the Faculty of Information Studies of the UCM in Madrid, and it's part of a research project in which I'm working together with Dr. Antonio Carpallo. The exhibition is organized in the following way. Starting with some informative panels that explain who the Hassan family is and its arrival in Spain at the beginning of the 19th century. It also begins with the first example of an era piano roll, the one you can see there. The next elements are these documents that can be seen right now, which describe the history of the Hassan family, their piano manufacturing, the sales in their stores, and other brochures. Some pictures of their store in the 60s in Madrid can be seen, there you are with the pianos, as well as other interesting books relevant to the occasion. In this first showcase, we've also wanted to show a singing roll, Rollo Cantor, of Jacinto Guerrero. The roll is unfolded and the name of the publisher can be seen, Victoria Popular. We can read part of the lyrics that appear on the right side of the paper. In the next panel, we start explaining the piano roll collection of the Hassan family. The next showcase contains different foreign rolls, some of these duo art ones, with the names and signatures of different pianist artists like Clarence Sattler in this first one. Here we have another one, Geraldine Watts, and we can also see some of the old invoices that the Hassan family have shown for this occasion. These correspond to different instruments, pianolas, piano players, etc., that were sold on their premises from the beginning of the 20th century. In this next panel, we observe the shelves containing the Hassen piano roll collection, which we kept in our faculty during the time of the technical work with the rolls. The following panels have helped us to explain the origins of the pianola with press advertisements, propaganda, and in the showcase below we can see other foreign rolls. This one from the Baldwin Company, also Cuban rolls, Pasquali, this one signed by Moisés Simons, interesting catalogs. There we have one of the Duo Art Pianola piano, the one of Best, another one of the Aeolian Company, and a last roll signed by Maurice Moskowski, explaining how the roll should be played, as you can read there. The exhibition continues with a full explanation of the pianola origins, the Hopfeld Fonola, and also the Welte firm. We have several pictures with different types of pianos and also the Aeolian Company building in the USA. Another one with the Blancafort family visit to the QRS factory in Chicago. And finally, we can see a Diana roll of the Spanish collection. On this other side, we show the manufacturing of the piano rolls through different panels and the Hopfeld's factory in Leipzig. Besides, we can read about the famous pianist Maria Cervantes, a Spanish lady to whom we wanted to pay a small tribute. Through these cards, she tells us about the incredible instruments Dea and Fonola. According to her testimony, one could feel an artist from the very first minute. We continue with other panels that explain more about artist roles. We can also see other Spanish roles, this time Princesa. We have shown in these 4 single showcases Spanish roles representing the most important publishers, followed by another Victoria role together with the Aeolian Company. This is the Victoria, now we can see the Aeolian. And of course different catalogs belonging to Victoria Rolls, which was the main producer and roll seller in our country. That started at the beginning of the 20th century. And a very interesting diagram of the Fonola, with all the explanations of the piano inside. In the upper panels, we can observe more images of Spanish rolls, and immediately after, there we can see more labels of Spanish rolls, and immediately after, the pictures of La Garriga. That was the Victoria factory in the town named La Garriga. Some workers appear punching the paper in the factory, and of course, we can see the real jewel in this exhibition, that is this beautiful pianola of the Hassen Company, which has been loaned for this occasion. As you can see, it's in a perfect state of conservation, although we have this announcement saying, do not touch. Here the visitors can observe the instrument, but not touch it, of course. We must remind that we are in a university, in a faculty, and we don't want the students to touch the pianola, just to see it. The exhibition continues with another picture of the factory in La Garriga, Barcelona. This time we can see Manuel Blancafort, the composer and son of the owner. He also appears working, punching, and transcribing the notes into the paper. We can also see other curious pictures of these days in the factory. It continues with some panels that explain how the pianola works, with all the different parts of the instrument, where the roll should be placed, explanation about the tracker bar, the different levers, and even the indications that appear printed on the rolls. Everything related with the themodist and metro style systems. In the showcase below, we can see Spanish rolls, Princesa and España Musical catalogs, and another 4 Spanish rolls that, together with the ones in the single showcases are the most representative of the collection. Here we have Edición Mott, followed by Oriental, and also a beautiful box of Diana, Clave with the coat of arms of Madrid, and Best, that was Victoria's branch for the South American market. The exhibition ends with several panels of press advertisements of the period. These two advertisements belong to El Heraldo de Madrid and El Liberal, all dated 1905, informing about different player pianos. We can also see the Welte, Mignon and Fonola pianos. And we finish showing another image of a singing roll, rollo cantor, with the lyrics, and a last advertisement of the Berkman, printed in London, 1905. And we finish with another Spanish roll, this time Victoria, with the title Los Puritanos of Bellini. Okay, last but not least, our acknowledgements to the Hassan family, to Ana Benavides, Adelina Clausó, Cynthia Piris, Maria Olivera, Jörg Holzmann, and Rafael Otermin. This last one lent us all the catalogs that can be seen in this exhibition. I hope you have all enjoyed this exhibition, and I invite you to visit it in the Faculty of Information Studies of the UCM in Madrid.
Okay, this was the home video. I think that it was interesting. I hope you enjoyed it. And just want to inform you that we finally published a catalog, a printed catalog of this exhibition. And I want to show you now very quickly the website where you can find this catalog. And of course, if you wish, you can also acquire it. Here is the link, okay, of Dickinson, which is the publisher. And this is the page, the web page where it appears, the catalog, okay? La colección de rollos de pianola de la Fundación Hatten José Suárez. Here is the book, and here is the price. It is very easy to get. And before leaving and saying goodbye, well, no, this is the book, I have it here, okay? So I just want to inform you all that next 30th October, that means in a couple of weeks, we will officially present the complete catalog of the entire collection. The detailed description of almost 500 rolls that make up the collection. Of course, you're all invited to the presentation of the book that will take place in Madrid, in my faculty, that mentioned date at 7 p.m. Thank you very much all for your attention, and hope you have enjoyed the video. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Esther. Thank you so much. Briefly, any comments or questions for anyone? Just
I just want
Daniel has also.
I would like to say something.
Go ahead.
Of course, you're all experts, and I can always see and listen to many interesting papers. And probably this presentation of the exhibition has been too simple for all of you. But you have to keep in mind that this exhibition was for the normal people that wish to attend this conference, one-day conference, and most of them have never seen a piano roll, not even a pianola. So for most of these people, it was very interesting to see the rolls because they have never seen a roll, a piano roll. And of course, it was interesting to read the documents, to see the process of how a piano player was built and all these things. So I know that it might be very simple for all of you, but I can say that I think it was the first time that a faculty in Madrid was doing something like this. So I'm very proud of this work. That's all. Thank you very much.
Yeah, can
No,
I just
Esther,
say, absolutely. And also, I thought the presentation of the roles themselves was beautiful.
Thank you
I've
so
never
much.
seen roles that are so graphically brilliant. Yeah, it
We
was
chose the most
good.
beautiful ones, of course, but it was very difficult. Well, not very difficult, but it was complicated, you know, to display them, and so that they didn't move and run and unroll more than we wished. So it was a little bit complicated, but I must say that this was our second piano roll exhibition. We
That
did
was very good.
one in 2017 with another collection, and so we had a little bit of experience, and this time I think it was a bit better, but it's always complicated.
yeah, no, I would, in addition, no apologies needed at all, Esther. I mean, I would say on the other hand, gosh, we should have more such exhibits, and we would only hope to have that um, available to people around the world to display and to understand more about the royal history. It is not an easy undertaking, and it's beautifully done. I absolutely agree. A museum quality work there, just beautifully done. And I was, if anything, envious of having such exhibits available to people to show them all. Another thing I would just add to this, which I'm not quite sure if we've quite grasped it, and I figured this out when you came to do your work. This is the information sciences division, as you say. What was maybe also not fully brought out with Judith's lecture at the beginning as well, is the importance of documentation cataloging, essentially. So the library science element of this this history. In this case, you have done this now with two major collections. And we say with
Well,
two
in fact,
collections, in
with
fact, the amount, three. Okay, right.
three, yes.
And actually, I say major in to some degree among the people here, even as being, relatively major, maybe because it's been even done. But Garcia San Pedro was 50 rolls or so. This is 500. We have collectors in attendance here who have 8,000 in Peter's cases and other such examples of thousands of rolls. And we could almost say that it would be astonishing at some point. We could only hope to have such dedicated people to actually display and document historical, collections, legacies when we have them. And it is a huge part of the burden of institutions to actually document properly what is on a roll, and the metadata and the whole cataloging process. And this is something we have also been very much focused on at Stanford, and it is, I think, something that needs further attention. And so we're grateful to have librarians and information science people attending to roles as well. And I think it's absolutely very, very important part of this whole project. So I congratulate you on that. And it is certainly a part of the whole puzzle. So we should not minimize it at all. So I'm very grateful to it. And I hope we'll continue to hear from you as well on this. And we should hopefully get more librarians and people interested in cataloging roles. It's a very challenging field to work with. So thank you so much, Esther. I think we'll move on. Yeah, thank you so much. And I want to quickly move on now. We're trying to keep on time here. So I will hand it off to Sebastian, who also doesn't need any introduction. Then we'll go on to Neil, and then I'll have a brief final word about Bob Berkman. But Sebastian, why don't you contribute your update with what's going on at Bern, who is our wonderful host for the last conference. Active researchers all there doing wonderful work. So take it on, Sebastian. Thanks.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll keep this short. This is just a very quick heads up on what's going on at the Bern Academy of the Arts, because we were very fortunate. End of last year, we were granted a new research project. And let me just try to share my screen with you here. Yeah, now you should be able to see this. So our new project has started now, just in August. It has an official German title, Nebendarstellerinnen in der Hauptrolle, Interpretation 1900 jenseits der Heroenerzählung, which actually proved to be rather difficult to translate. So what will it be about? Our idea was there has been a lot of research going on in the past 20, 30 years on piano rolls. And when we were looking at interpretations, performances of classical music on piano rolls, usually we tended to look at famous pianists and also important pieces of the canonic classical repertoire, because there it was easy to establish some basic concepts of interpretation of performance in the 19th and early 20th century. It was easier to compare recordings because we might have had several recordings of the same piece. And while there certainly is a lot more to be done, even with those famous artists, with famous pieces, I think, and we believe when we conceive this project, that we now have the experience and also the methodology necessary to go a step further and to look at some pianists that are not that well known, some repertoire that is maybe even forgotten today, but that was still part of the repertoire of pianists at the beginning of the 20th century and part of the repertoire that was recorded on rolls. So that's why this project focuses mainly on what, in a bit simplistic way, which could also work as a rough translation into English, could be the kind of forgotten recordings and forgotten pianists, so to say. As always, you can find a short description of all of our Bern Academy of the Arts research projects on our website of HKB Institute of Interpretation. And here you see the, just the sheer facts of this project. So it started now August 23, and it's supposed to last for 4 years. The project lead is with Manuel Bertsch, whom you've also met in these preludes and at the conference last year. And we are a team of 5. So it's Manuel and myself as the senior researchers, and then we have the luxury of having 2 new PhD students with us and our project manager, Simon Gertschen. Manuel Bertsch will work on what we call the anonymous pianists, or at least those that we know very, very little about. And he will create a methodological foundation on how to include roll recordings into performance and interpretation research by pianists we know very little about, where we have no biographical background or so. We don't know whom they studied with. Sometimes we really don't even know their names. With some roll companies we know that we have hand played, don't know who actually played them. And how, through looking at these pianists who were not in the first line of the international virtuosos, we can still learn a lot about the general stylistic changes that happened in the early 20th century. Myself, I will work on a methodology on how to go beyond the Welte, which is a system that we know the most about so far and that we have worked on the last years, so that we will be able to include in our analysis as many other formats as possible, especially, of course, the European reproducing formats from the Hupfeld and Phillips company. And also that we create the technical necessities to include the dynamics into this process of performance analysis. And then we have our two PhD students, Cecilia Facchini from Italy, who has already done a research master at our school, will look at recordings from the Roman or Italian Liszt school, especially the students of Giovanni Scambatti. And she will contextualize these recordings with the written instructions in editions or in treatises, and will point out some particularities of the Roman Liszt school. And Philippe Gaspo, who was also a piano student at our school and wrote a wonderful thesis here on some Liszt recordings by Joseph Weiss. He will look at recordings by women virtuosos, especially also those who were connected in a special way to the recording companies like Eugénie Adam Bénard for Welte or Marguerite Volavie for Empico. And so, will establish the significance and importance of these women pianists in the early recording repertoire. So those are the four research areas that we'll try to cover in this project. Not really the same, well, technically speaking, not the same project, but of course very closely connected, is the construction of our new music roll scanner that was already mentioned by Judith Kemp earlier. This was delayed a bit due to Corona and some supply problems, but we are nearing the finishing line. And I hope that Daniel Debrunner will create first scans by the end of the year. This is also one of our projects you'll find on the website. And it's kind of good now, actually, that creating this scanner goes hand in hand with having this new research project, because now we can also, with the development of the analysis software that we have, we can adjust this to the demands that we have with the new research questions and the new project. So by the end of the year, I think we'll have the results there, so that methodology and also technology go hand in hand with our actual research. Yeah. We are very much at the beginning, so there is not much content to present yet. I will leave that for further conferences, especially, of course, Sydney next year, where both of our PhD students will hopefully be able to present first results of their research. We'll keep you posted also through the preludes, of course. By the way, it was not a coincidence that I chose the pictures showing all of us at the piano, because I think that's one of the strengths of the research at music universities like the Bern Academy of the Arts, that we combine music research with our own activities as performers and as musicians. So one part of the aspect of this research will always be, what relevance does it have to our performances today? How can it influence our playing? And we will always try to also demonstrate what we learn from analyzing all of these roles and these wonderful performances through our own playing in lecture recitals, in concerts, etc. We'll keep you posted about outputs, publications, etc. One thing that we'll definitely participate in is a great special exhibition at the museum in Zeven that those of you who participated in the symposium last year now already know. From next summer on, there will be a special exhibition there on reproducing pianos, and the HKB will contribute to the content of this exhibition. Yeah, I think that's all for now. Thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any questions, of course, please.
Yes, go ahead, Pietro.
No, sorry, I was just approving. No questions.
Okay, no problem. No problem. Wonderful news. It's always wonderful to hear of get research money and research projects, and that is always a struggle for us in the institutional world. And so to hear of such a project being conceived of and funded with such a variety of people, with all sorts of areas covered, is very exciting and wonderful to hear that from our perspective. Can I have a quick question? How many years is this sort of aimed to be, approximately?
4 years. Will last till 27.
Fantastic. Great. So we look forward to it, and glad to hear that we'll see you as well in Australia, Sydney. So to that point, I don't know, Daniel, do we have Peter with us, or shall we put it off for next time?
Peter, yes, but not Neil.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do we have Neil? Okay, we don't have Neil with us. Okay, that's what I meant. So maybe we'll, Neil had an update on some of the events occurring in or the planning portion of the events for the conference next year. But I can just say, actually, we have Peter here to say a few things, but I think I'll just keep it briefly and say that it's looking really exciting. Among other things, we have possible performances with an ensemble, with an orchestra, performing with some of the roles, which is always a treat and not an easy thing to undertake. And as well, some instruments and other things. If you haven't all been to Sydney Conservatorium, this is a top flight conservatory and a beautiful spot to have such a event right in the center of Sydney. So it's a beautiful location. Australia has its charms, and if there's any reason, we don't need an excuse to head down to visit Australia and its beautiful country. So we hope that everyone will be able to join us. And I think I'll leave it for that. We can get more details of it next time when Neil joins us, perhaps at the next Prelude. We do have one more Prelude scheduled for the late winter. And I believe it's on the website. I'm missing the date at the moment, but it'll be sometime in late February or March, I believe, or February or March. Daniel, Martin can correct me in a moment. But maybe I will just finish off with the final thing. It's just a brief mention of an important figure to some of us in the rural community, Bob Berkman. He passed away this summer, and it was very sad news to hear about that. And he was a really well-known figure in the community, and he had a unique window into a world that we are now, in a sense, all wishing to know more about. Because he made and created roles for one of the last remaining roll manufacturers, QRS, a company that we've heard of, already mentioned here a number of times, a company originally founded in 1900. So he joined QRS in 1975 and spent almost 50 years associated with them. And it was, as he put it, his career. A career in piano rolls. So in addition to this, he was perhaps better known to many of us as a wonderful musician as well, and one who made the pianola his virtuoso instrument. He could play that instrument as well as anyone I have heard, and it was a great pleasure to have him give a concert at Stanford in 2018. In particular, he made a specialty of those 88-note rolls that that we were talking into believers in the value of this legacy. So one of his interests was in ethnic 88-note rolls, and he wrote about this in a recent volume published by Darius, who's here. And we at Stanford were also grateful to receive from him one of his pianolas, which was restored by John Perry, his good friend and collaborator, who I contacted and who incidentally said he had so many wonderful stories of his wonderful life with Bob Berkman. So I'd love to spend more time talking about Bob and his important perspectives and his contributions to our understanding of roles. However, we'll save that for another time in greater detail, perhaps at the conference. But for now, I'd like to share with you all just a brief video of him talking about his life and playing a little bit. And if anyone would like to say anything about him after that, we can hear from you at that time. So if you will permit me, just a brief video interview, basically, with Bob about his life with piano rolls. And we see something of the QRS factory that was mentioned and other things here. And you hear from him in his own words. He attended these conferences, but never ended up presenting to them, I suppose. So we'll miss him in that regard. But here we have, he's going to put in a cameo appearance for us. So if you can see this, and let me know if you can't, or if you can't hear it, I will start this little short video now.
Part of the appeal of it to me is the utter magic of it. That this is a piece of paper with holes in it, and yet through the glory of gears and pumps and all the mechanism that's in there, it's making music. I consider myself extremely fortunate that that job and I found each other. I don't know what I would have done with my life. I really don't know.
I think it was love at first sight. I think when I walked in here, who can imagine what a piano roll factory is like? You know, you don't have any idea. And it was pretty much what you might hope it was going to be, you know, and there was this great old machinery clanking away, turning out rolls, and it was a bustling place. It was delightful in its oldness. Well, this is a perforator. This is where the process of manufacturing begins. The roll paper you see here emerging from the perforator is actually about 16 layers. So this is being punched 16 copies at a time. And you'll see it chugs along, and then the finished work plops onto the pallet in front of the machine. I will miss it, you know. These are wonderful old machines. The thing that I would most wish to be noted is that we made as good a product in many ways, but as good a product as the company had made in its heyday. We understood the craft of roll making. We got better at the craft of roll making the longer we worked at it. We turned out a satisfactory product, one that, you know, the customer was happy they parted with their money to obtain. I don't actually know how many rolls I have. I may have about, I don't know, 2,500 or 3,000 rolls. Putting a roll in a player piano used to be something that everybody knew how to do. It's no longer the case, but it's really very simple. You would hold it so that the title is facing you, you know, like a window shade, just like this. And the left chuck here on the piano is spring-loaded. So you want to push that in, which enables you to position the right one with the drive slot onto the drive chuck. And then it's where it belongs. And attach the tab end here to this, which is called the take-up spool. It's just a whole world that I enjoyed, not just peering into, but actually, you know, having a sort of hands-on role, R-O-L-E.
And when you have a good player piano that will respond, you know, to your ministrations here at the Livers, then it's just, I just have no end of fun. A friend of mine refers to player piano. He says, well, that's your one topic. Yeah, well, pretty much. I mean, it's not my only topic, but it's my favorite topic.
Great. So just sort of a fascinating life. You know, I don't mean this in a derogatory way, but he was part of a sort of a dying world, and at a time when it was at its very end, Curious did close down. We were able to visit him. Peter, in fact, toured the factory with him in 2018, and it was a wonderful time we had with him, and many memories of that. So we will talk about him more in the days to come and hear some of his performances as well, which were truly outstanding, and really made the case to me for the importance of playing 88-note, you know, non-expression roles. So yeah, anyone want to say anything? Darius, I know you had some interaction with him with the publication of the book. Do you want to say anything, or otherwise we can?
Oh yes, thank you. Yes, Bob was exceptional person. Yes, he was the first who responded to my first email to MMG, and he was the first person who. So I was very lucky to have him as a friend, and we have collaborated about 15 years. He introduced me into ethnic piano roles, so I was very happy to meet him and to collaborate with him. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. Great.
Yes,
so yeah, absolutely. He was just genuinely a delightful person. I talked to some people who would have loved to talk to about him more, but who were unable to make it today. So hopefully we will hear from others and have some sort of a further discussion of his legacy at a later point. So I'm very happy to maybe say it was a wonderful couple of hours with all of you Roll folks, and I'm excited to. I'm still really looking forward to this next year. To me, the in-person meeting. I hope to see many of you there, and we do have another Prelude meeting in, what was the date, Martin? Do you have the date handy?
February 17th.
February 17th. So mark that on your calendars, and we will have more talks as well. If any of you have things you'd like to bring up or updates, please contact us and let us know. And we'd be happy to include that on the next program. But otherwise, I'm looking forward to seeing you all soon, and great to have you here. And bye for now.